Did you know they plan to build over 3,000 wind turbines on Queensland's Great Dividing Range? Over 3,700 kilometres of new haulage roads will carve through old growth forest. Destroying forests for industrial renewables makes no sense. It doesn't have to be this way. The intact biodiverse ranges of Queensland are no place for renewables. Take 2 minutes to learn the truth about the destruction they cause. Go to rainforestreserves.org.au.
We have a massive power, and it's the power to say no.
2024 is the year when the pushback begins in earnest.
People ain't seen nothing yet. That's what I keep telling people.
It is a master-servant relationship where we, the governed, are the masters.
Doctors are gaslighting patients.
You press down enough on people for long enough, you leave them no choice but to rebel.
So, no, I don't want to forget about it, and I won't shut up about COVID.
The story of the unvaccinated is still yet to be told.
We are one people, one flag, one Australia.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the XCandidates. My name is Stephen Tripp, joined in person by Mr. Adam Zara and also Millie Fontana. Firstly, Adam, how are you going?
I'm pretty good, thanks, mate. How are you going?
I'm very well, thank you. And we're joined by the lovely, amazing, wonderful Millie Fontana. How are you?
Living the dream, mate. Thank you very much for having me.
No, thank you for being here. It's very exciting to do this in Richard Storch's house. Again, thank you, Richard, for hosting us. He's not here because he's got a little bit of a cold, so we're probably all going to end up with COVID after this. But
well, at least a cold.
Yeah, we'll live. We'll be okay.
Well,
it's better than him infecting us with something else. Which
coronavirus.
Now, how have you been? You were last with us on episode 77, which is quite a while ago. But what's the update with you, Millie?
Oh, look, I'm just happy to reconnect. It's been a while, so I figured this is a good time, better than ever. Let's go.
Yeah, awesome.
Well, look, before we get to our special guest, I'll quickly just let everyone know how you can support us. If you choose, you can head to Buy Me a Coffee and head there and throw us a few dollars. It helps pay for the stream, helps pay for a few other things that we plan to do as well. So if you would like to support us there, you can head to Buy Me a Coffee. Also, you can also head to our T-shirt shop. Adam and I are both wearing the XCandidates T-shirts. Looking very stylish. How's the material for you, Adam? I think the material,
really nice.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
Yeah,
it's really good material.
I'll wear these to work.
Yeah. Why not? I wore mine to the gym the other day.
Oh yeah,
it's good.
That's pretty good.
Awesome. Yeah,
looks all right. It's got a bit of an X Factor feel to it, to be honest.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm still designing my shirts now that we're running for council in Campbelltown. I've got some ideas, so we'll get one of my ones up there too once I'm registered.
Yeah, excellent. Also, just to quickly mention the Light newspaper, if you want to help be a distributor, I've been talking about this the last few weeks. You can, if you're in Sydney, please call the number or text 0406 861 816. And also, if you're outside of Sydney, you can head to the actual website, thelight.australia.com, and it's basically free to hand out to people. You just have to pay for the actual purchasing of the wholesale price of the paper, which is like 15 cents a paper or something like that.
See the light.
Yeah, see the light and then hand it out and help out in any way that you possibly can. But on tonight's episode, we've got the leader of One Nation in Victoria, Mr. Warren Pickering.
G'day, Warren.
No, I haven't brought him on yet.
Oh, I can't see today. Okay, so I'm looking at the Acer computer here. So
the famous Acer laptop everyone complains about.
Flying blind.
Acer. So Warren was on episode 19. Believe it or not, I watched it last night. Now that was a time capsule.
There was a few
that was a
lot less grey hairs in the beard back then.
Not so much for Warren, but more for us. Like the journey that we've been on since. But maybe let's catch up with Warren, see where he's at. Welcome to the XCandidates again, Warren Pickering.
Thank you very much, team. Appreciate the opportunity. Hey, by the way, I do enjoy the T-shirts. I'm all about branding, and I've got mine right here.
Awesome. So, mate, the last time we spoke to you was the lead up to the Victorian election, and we hadn't seen Ricky Lee Turrell elected at that point. She subsequently was elected. How's she going in the Victorian Parliament? And from your interactions as well, what's your take of Victorian politics at the moment?
Oh, look, where do I start? Well, firstly, Ricky's doing really well. Obviously, so Victoria itself is in the upper house or the council is broken up into regional areas, not like you guys in New South Wales. If you've just a legislative council member, you represent the whole state. So she's specifically elected to Northern Victoria region, which is a rural region, which is right up her alley, and also our party demographic, obviously. She does a great job advocating for a lot of the relevant topics in regional areas. Specifically the Murray-Darling Basin, being that we now have Labor in all three states associated with the basin and federal government as well. And they still can't seem to find a cohesive balance between management of the biggest irrigation system in the Southern Hemisphere. And that's where we come in. We're lucky enough in Victoria, our water minister is actually pushing back on her federal counterpart's Murray-Darling Basin plan. So Ricky's actually, in a strange turn of events, is able to support the Victorian Labor minister in this regard. But yeah, look, she's doing fantastic. She does great work. She's out and about, super busy, as you would expect. There's a bit of skullduggery in Parliament, as you'd expect. The Liberal National Party in Victoria aren't necessarily conservative-minded as what we'd like. So I think One Nation brings that balance back on the crossbench, and I think that's absolutely paramount. Which also seems to the success of the party having an elected state member in every mainland state.
And I guess it goes opposite to what people were saying, where One Nation would never support Labor in anything. I know Pauline's been accused of that many, many times and whatnot, but but Pauline's always said herself, if Labor come up with a good policy and it's good for the people, we'll support it. So I guess, you could always, she should use that Ricky as an example, I guess, as, Labor have got actually a decent minister in there trying to do something right for the people, and One Nation are backing that minister up a little bit with that.
Yeah, that's right. Look, and we're not necessarily getting the same feedback in return, but we wouldn't expect to. The point is Ricky Lee represents her constituents, the best of her community. So, yeah, exactly as Paulina has alluded to many times in the past, if they come up with good policy, we'll absolutely support it. We've also been, just for clarification, so obviously once we got Ricky Lee up, I went on as Ricky Lee's advisor also, so I work in Parliament. So we formulated a policy to push back against solar energy generation facilities across Northern Victoria region. So Northern Victoria specifically already has the largest in the country and proposed next two largest solar power generation facilities in the country. Now that's in Victoria, arguably the worst state in the country to be producing solar generated power from. Like, it's madness.
Not the sunniest place in the world.
It's absolutely madness. So there's still work continuing on that. It obviously didn't get up, but we're trying to have it referred to a committee and gain a bit more traction on that. The relevance behind this bill, and we try to be reasonable with it. So the relevance behind it specifically is that I didn't realise until we started doing the research, 30% of Australia's domestic produce comes out of Victoria, and specifically the Murray-Darling Basin, because it is the largest water irrigation system in the Southern Hemisphere. Now, when you talk about future food security, we've got an inherent responsibility as a state to ensure that our irrigable agricultural land remains agricultural land. And I think that's paramount. That's super important. But when I say we try to be reasonable, we try to just say, all right, now let's say not everything's off the table, but if it hits any two of the environment handbook's own restrictions, so if it hits, say it's in a flood-prone area, okay, that's not so great. Say it's in bushfire plan overlay, all right, not so great. If it's in domestic water catchment supply, okay, not so great. Now, if it hit any two out of the four, we said that's all right. But if it hits three or more, where some of these proposed facilities do hit, but then they're not viable for what you're choosing to utilize them for. So, yeah, it's disappointing that it hasn't gotten up, because we have tried to use a common sense approach, and we've tried to use, I don't know what you guys call it up there, Department from Energy, Sustainability, Environment. I don't know if it's the same in New South Wales. But anyway, so we've utilised their own handbook to try and be reasonable. And yeah, look, there was just it didn't work. It didn't work thus far. So the work continues.
There's nothing reasonable about these renewable energy, like ideas anyway. So to expect you guys being reasonable and trying to kind of meet them halfway, and then having somebody and then expecting that in reciprocation, I don't think it's ever going to happen. So, but keep up the good fight with it, because we know it's all just junk anyway, and it's all going to end up as junk.
Well, I mean, speaking of the renewables, like the floors are shining bright like a diamond. I don't know if anybody saw the wind turbine on fire in Victoria today. The first one in 20 years, apparently, but
Just on that, so how are we even going to know if they're on fire out in, the biodiverse habitat of the ocean when they're 10 k's offshore? We're not even going to know what sort of damage we're going to be causing to the environment.
Yeah, we've got the same issue out in New South Wales. We're going to do them offshore in the Illawarra, and that's going to be pretty big. That's going to be a lot of issues out there, because they're going to float them on flotillas. They're not actually going to anchor them to the ground. So I don't know how you put something 300 meters up in the air on rocky water in a little vessel that spins, right, and then expect them to work. So that's going to be really interesting, actually, to see that. I kind of almost want to not protest it, because I kind of just want to see if they could actually do it. But
it kind of seems like it'll flop all on its own, and possibly quite literally.
It will be. It's just going to be like a big flop. But the problem is how much damage is it going to do to the environment? That's the problem. We know that it's got BPA in the blade. So, imagine 100-meter wide blades, okay, all that chemicals and all that stuff hitting the ocean and just destroying the water there, and then all the electrical cables. It's a whale migration path. There's so much, it's so stupid.
You know what? I think it's a good thing for us to reject it, because it shows that we actually do care about the environment, and maybe the Greens and Labor don't care about the environment the way that they claim to.
Oh, I'm pretty sure that they don't care about it, because their whole policies have gone LGBT now, and they don't really talk much about, the wildlife and animals anymore. Yeah. And funnily enough, sorry, like talking about all the renewables, it's just like, you've got us on the renewables now.
He's on a tangent. Yeah.
Well, what happens is, like, they're cutting down trees. They have a spotter looking for koalas in the trees. Like, you're going to be able to see a tree falling down with a koala in it. But they just knocking down hectares upon hectares of rainforest, of forest, of bushland, of native bushland. For what? For something that's going to stand up for 12 years and then possibly come down and burn the place down anyway?
And it sounds expensive anyway. What are you going to do? Helicopter infrared the koalas or something? Like, you got drones for that? Or like, what are we talking budget-wise?
I think it's a Brumby thing. I think it's like the Snowy River Brumbies, where they're saying that there's so many and there's not, or there is, I don't know. They're saying that there's more than there actually is. So they're prepared to cull them or something like that. I don't understand. I don't get it either.
I think there's too many guesstimations associated with the entire green industrial industry. And when they forecast costings and things like that, they seem to utilize models and projections, which we know we've seen them fail repeatedly. So nobody has any faith in projections on modeling or anything like that. But they don't take into consideration the flow-on implications of some of the other things they do. Rising energy costs and things like that means it costs more to produce the materials, the base level products that you then need to construct these things, So when they use their cost projections, they're using them cost projections from today, not what they're going to be in 12 months, 24 months when the project gets underway, We've already seen that with the Metro Rail link in Melbourne that nobody asked for, by the way. Yeah. Just back on Victoria. So that is an interesting fact that I'm sure you're all tracking. Victoria's state net debt is estimated to have reached $167 billion by the middle of next year. Middle of
only?
Which is the equivalent of Queensland, New South Wales, and Tasmania combined. And a lot of people don't understand the implications of that. So what it means right now is 6.681 million Victorians are all contributing, and we're currently paying $15 million a day to service the debt alone without touching the principal. By the 26-27 year, that's estimated to be $25 million a day. That is outrageous. Like, they are the most fiscally illiterate state government in Australian history. And we're allowing them to make decisions on renewables based on projections that we know are wrong.
So $5 for every person who's paying tax every day is going to pay off just the interest alone.
Pauline's made an interesting comment in the chat. she said Tasmania is already 100% renewable with the hydro system down there, but they're still putting in more renewables. Isn't that an indication of the gravy train still going?
Yeah.
Do you know, look, and I think there's a couple of contributing factors there. So the first one being that, yeah, hydro is fantastic. We know it works, and I understand that. If it's set up through natural water sources or it's dammed or it's done correctly, we know that. Snowy hydro works. Snowy hydro 2.0, it's turning to be an expensive exercise in futility, let's be honest. But I think the other one, so Tasmania is still producing more because we have the Marinus link, which runs from Tasmania, and that comes into Loy Yang, just down the road from me here, Loy Yang coal-fired power station. Now, I believe they're constructing a second Marinus link, but the idea with that is not just to generate more green hydro energy from Tasmania to Victoria. It's supposed to pick up the power lines of the new proposed wind farms that are going to be offshore, decimating world natural heritage areas like Wilson's Promontory. And instead of coming straight up the back to Loy Yang, where we already have existing power line infrastructure, they want to bring it up over the beachhead and then run it over regional farmland just to pick up the extra little bit that these wind farms are supposed to generate. It's madness.
Now, Warren, I've done something really dangerous. I've put the link in the chat if anyone wants to call in and contribute. You can just click that StreamYard link and you can use your phone or your laptop to call in. Maybe you want to ask Warren a question or make a comment. But Warren, we know at the last federal election, you almost snuck into the Senate. Are you going to run again?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, at this stage, it looks like I will be the endorsed Senate candidate for Victoria again. Look, unless something drastic happens, but regardless of whatever happens there, if it's me or somebody else, I'll put all my weight behind whoever that person is. However, yeah, it does look like at this stage that I will be endorsed as a Senate candidate for Victoria again, and we're going to have a proper crack at it this time around. I mean, last time around, we knew there was a change in sentiment in the community, but I think the last couple of years, it's really hurt people's hip pocket, and I think people have started to wake up and educate themselves and become slightly more politically astute, and they realise that we need a balance on the crossbench. To achieve that, they know they need to start voting for minor parties.
Yeah, they absolutely need to start voting for minor parties because, I mean, we're the minor parties are the only ones that keep the bigger boys a bit honest, right? And what I like about the minor parties is, okay, you might not have too much sway in Parliament, on most things, but there will be some points that you will, because you might be a deciding vote. But you can actually bring it to a public awareness.
Are we really going to have a debate on minor parties?
No, you know what I think it is?
They can. Oh, sorry, go.
Yeah, I'll go. I reckon people are waking up to how it all works. Right, so they now understand things like the Senate, whereas previously they might not have. So over the last 2 years, I reckon the general public's had a bit of a crash course. Now we kind of get it.
Yeah.
And so now it's sort of obvious, like, who has a chance to actually win, who maybe doesn't, and is wasting everyone's time up the garden path. And so I reckon it'll actually be really good, this next Fed.
I think the catalyst that's caused this change within the community is because a lot of people are starting to see the two majors, obviously, as a uni party, and they both seem to represent the same policies largely. And I think as a result, all of those people that previously bought the narrative and believed that, for some reason that the Greens still represented environmental protections and weren't a socialist extinctionist movement, and believed that One Nation were a right-wing extremist party, they're now understanding that we're probably the last bastion of real conservatism in the country.
Warren, we've interviewed two other potential candidates in Victoria, Bernie Finn, which I think he's fantastic. I think you're fantastic as well. We also interviewed another guy called Jordan Ditloff with the Libertarian Party. And, do you think that there's too many minor parties in Victoria? I mean, there's Freedom Party, Family First. I mean, there's all the, potentially splitting the vote everywhere. Is that a problem?
Look, it is. It really is. So at the state level, because Victoria still runs a group voting ticket. Now, most people don't understand how that works, okay? So a group voting ticket lends itself to a subversion of the democratic process where you give a party your number one and that party gets to carry and choose your 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever else, or where your preference flow goes. So in that regard, it helps to have a lot of parties because all us like-minded minor parties can preference each other and flow through each other until ultimately somebody gets elected. So we're using our collective weight to get minor conservative parties elected at the state level. It is a terrible, terrible system, and Victoria is the only state that still uses it. And you can argue all day and night as to why that is. But at the federal level, we realised this from the last federal election. We fractured the vote so dramatically that we didn't really get anyone up. I mean, all our collective weight, we all thought we were going to do well everywhere, and it only got, Senator Ralph Babet up, which is great. It's fantastic to have Ralph in the Senate. But the reality is, if we had a vote into preference, we probably would have got 2 up. We probably could have got Ralph and myself up. And I think that's where the problem is. So long as all those minor parties preference each other before the majors, especially the conservative minor parties, preference each other, and the libertarians, if we all preference each other before we go to the Liberals and Nationals, then, we all benefit. That's the only way we can collectively lean on each other without merging parties.
Now, Warren, I said I did something very dangerous by putting the link in the chat. This might be a little bit dangerous. We've got a caller calling in. It is actually Jordan Ditloff from the Libertarian Party. Jordan, just you'll have to take yourself off mute, mate. Do you have a question? Firstly, welcome back to the show.
G'day, Jordan.
Hey, how are you?
I can't say that this was unexpected. knowing you, mate, and it's no surprise that you've called in. But do you have a question or a comment for Warren?
Yeah, I do. Hey, how you going, Warren?
Hey, mate. Yeah, good, thanks.
Yeah, good to finally meet you.
Yeah, we'll get around it once the campaign starts.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, campaign started for me well and truly. I actually was at Loyang Power Station today listening to you talk about that. I was asking a few locals about how they felt about the proposed nuclear site. But one quick comment and then a question.
Before you dive into it, so did they have any clarification on the second Marinas link coming up into the back of Loyang?
I didn't find out anything about that. I was listening with great interest when you described that. But yeah, no, they didn't say anything about that. The sentiments though were very supportive of anything that keeps the industry and jobs associated with those power stations alive. A lot of people interestingly said that they'd prefer a mix of coal and nuclear, that they didn't see any reason to get rid of the coal-fired power stations.
Look, and that's the financially viable option too in the short term.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, we basically say no bans, no subsidies, all options should be on the table. It shouldn't be a question of ideology. So I think we agree on that. So the comment I was going to make was recently there was a digital ID, sort of digital privacy rally that One Nation ran around the country. In Queensland, John Humphreys from our party sort of participated in the rally there with you guys, and in New South Wales, John Ruddick from our party sort of was invited to participate as well. I just wanted to let you know that if there's ever anything in the future you guys are doing like that, I'd love to be a part of it and work together where we can, because I think there's a lot of overlap.
Roger that, mate. So I organised the Melbourne event, and I actually sent an invite to David Limbrick, but he had a bit on. But yeah, Limbrick was going.
Totally cool. Yeah, and on federal issues in particular, which I get the sense you're probably going to be talking about, I think David's going to handle a lot of stuff to me. So just wanted to make that approach and let you know.
I will keep that in mind, mate.
Yeah, awesome. The second question was actually going to be about preferences. So you guys were just talking about that issue, and it sounds like, so while I was waiting to ask the question, I think you might have already answered it, but my question was, is One Nation at the next federal election going to adopt the same sort of approach that a lot of the minor parties adopted last time, where it was essentially committing to put the major parties last and to sort of direct preferences to each other in the hope that
that's
at least
our
one major
strategy for every election, to ensure that the Conservative or the Libertarian vote, because we are friendly parties, to ensure that the entire vote and vote preference goes through all of those like-minded minor parties before it eventually gets down to the Libs and the Nats. Absolutely.
If I may,
and obviously Labor after that, and all the socialists and communists way down the bottom.
100%, but also I think it's more important to actually instill it in the voters in terms of taking control of their own preferences, because sometimes we can't always afford to be puritanical with this stuff, and we've got to be realistic sometimes about the wiggle room. It's politics, so there's no promises I think that you can make until...
I think you're absolutely correct in saying that, Millie. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, awesome, man. Just as a parting thing, I'll head up and leave you guys to it. I don't mean to hog the show at all, but just so you guys know, while you've been on air, actually, since it started, Family First's application to the AEC has gone to the objection stage. So they've actually passed the membership checks So it's likely that Family First will be contesting the federal election as well. So with that, I'll leave you guys to it. Enjoy the rest of the podcast.
Thanks, Jordan.
Thank you, Jordan.
Thanks,
Jordan.
Hi. Yeah, so like if I can just like double back to that, because we had that funny predicament where in New South Wales during the state elections, we could barely find any candidates, but every man and his dog wanted to run in Victoria in like the most difficult kind of sequence. But I think like the good thing about the federal elections is because it's mandatory preferential, unlike New South Wales, where most people just tick one or two and then call it a day. We have an opportunity to actually help knock each other in, so to speak, if the preference discipline is good, but then it is unreliable. Like sometimes, say, the UAP will skip and go straight to the Liberals on their how to vote cards. And that's why I really think like, yeah, we can try and be puritanical, but it's not always going to be the case. And so really putting the power back in the hands of the actual voters.
That's what I was alluding to before. So I tried to run an active education campaign at the last federal election, and the trouble is the people that are out there that are politically astute, they already get it. And those that don't really want to know, because we removed political science from the syllabus in this country in the 1980s. And as a result, we have a lot of political illiteracy in this country amongst all generations. A lot of older people that I've spoken to, especially in the last couple of years, they say, oh, mate, we'd love to vote for you guys, but we can't. We need to get the libs up. I'm like, you clearly don't understand how it works. You can give us your one. Ours will just go through like-minded parties, and it will always get to them before Labor. And they're like, they just seem to be drowning in this thought process that if I don't vote for Libs and Nats, then the Labor Party are going to get up. And look, I think we need to get away from that.
But that's going to be an interesting.
Puritanical, and that did hurt us when UAP. They didn't do it everywhere, mind you, but in a few seats they did
not
go
everywhere. Yeah,
number 2 to the Liberal Party. And as a result, the minor parties sort of missed out on that preference flow. But yeah,
see, the biggest problem with all these minor parties is the preference discipline, and the preferences aren't flowing back to where they need to go. And it's, to be honest with you, it's hurting the Liberal Party just as much as the minor parties. And look, you can have One Nation, you can have Libertarians, you can have UAP or Family First, whoever. But the only party on the right side of politics that has any chance of governing is the Liberal Party and the National Party as a coalition. So I guess flowing on from that point, we've seen Peter Dutton. He's come out and supported the No campaign with a voice referendum, which I think is a good sign. Now he's come out with this nuclear policy as well, another good sign in my opinion. If the Liberals can get back on track, is there any need for the minor parties? And the minor parties doing more damage than good?
And look, and this is where I was going to go with it too, because I'd like to challenge you on the point of that. While I agree with most of what you're saying, most people would agree that they've strayed from their conservative roots, their conservative base. That's why us conservative minor parties have gained so much traction in the last couple of years, especially in Victoria.
Bang on. No.
Can you argue that Peter Dutton's bringing it back though?
Look, I'm not saying he's not, but we exist to keep them honest, to ensure they do come back to their conservative base.
That's exactly right.
You're taking, I mean, the preference discipline's just not there. I mean, generally it's about 50%. I mean, Labor can coexist with the Greens because their preference discipline is very high.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to cut in here. The Liberal Party is notorious for not actually treating us very well.
Us in terms of
all the alt minor parties, whatever you want to call it, right? Yeah. They've learned through the last federal election where we deliberately hurt them by not giving the preferences that actually they do need to treat us with respect and negotiate and treat us accordingly. So, you know, it's like in certain electorates where we put the Labor Party ahead of the cancerous members of the Liberal Party that have strayed from the conservative roots, right? That was a big movement, even putting the majors last. And so now I think they're on the same page that, we will actually be held to account by the public. And I agree with you. The flow needs to happen, but it also needs to be earned, because what motivation do people have to even whack the coalition in that preference flow if they don't honour their own values?
You're blaming the Liberal Party, but is it more that the voters on the right just are more individual? They don't like to think on their own, and they don't like being told what to do.
I think they're demoralised.
But on that point,
what have you done for me lately? You know what I mean?
Well, I just listed two things. The voice campaign. I mean, if it wasn't for Jacinta Price, if it wasn't for Peter Dutton,
it wasn't for Advance Australia. Let's be for real.
Well, I mean, but Advance Australia had to use Jacinta Price, and they had to use Warren Mundine, and to a lesser extent, they had to use Peter Dutton. and they had to also use a lot of Liberal Party resources to get that done.
I think the voice
boots
is
on the
more...
ground and people organising, coordinating the on the ground campaigns and things like that. I mean, you have to give some credit where credit is due.
And I will, but go on, Warren.
You can't be a vocal proponent against 2 or 3 major issues within an entire election, between 4 years and expect the full Conservative base to get behind you again. And I think Millie's absolutely right. Minor parties did kick them around, prove to them that we aren't to be messed with. Collectively, our weight exists purely to bring them back to their Conservative base. And I mean, not just at the federal level. Look at the state level. How has Labor in Victoria managed to accrue so much debt and still managed to re-elect? The reality is we've got weak leadership in the Liberal Party of Victoria. It's woefully inadequate. I mean, it was Matthew Guy's election to lose against Dan Andrews. He had more cannon fodder than any other, opposition leader in political history, and he didn't capitalise on it. And I think that speaks rhythms. And as much as you say that, I think...
Let me throw this in the mix then. Here, I know this is not applicable to you guys down in Victoria, but here in New South Wales and in the state level, One Nation had 3 upper house members. That's been reduced to 1, and the word on the street is that is likely to be reduced to 0 in the near future. For the voters of that party that worked, I mean, and the volunteers that worked so hard on the ground to get those 3 people elected, now they're zip, or the potential of being zip. Wouldn't they have been better putting their vote somewhere else?
No.
No, I don't believe so. Not at all.
No. Look, objectively speaking, my feelings aside, because you know how I feel about this, I don't like that they've quit the party, but even still, the values that each of those 3 represent is still arguably better than toe the party line, absolutely done nothing for me lately in the major parties.
2 of them are ex-Labor.
Well, regardless, they're still individually good. And the thing is what I was going to say, doubling back to your point, yeah, there are some good people in the Liberal Party and National Party. I like some of them, right? But the collective sentiment is just not good enough in terms of like actually being staunch on sticking to the party values. In my mind, if you've got a Liberal or a National that doesn't stick to actually what's in the mission statement, right, you should be booted from the party.
Oh, no, I agree with that completely.
So, and it's to our point, I think, what Warren's saying is you can't...
Today.
Like we saw Matt Keane leave the New South Wales Liberal Party. I mean, I think a lot of Liberals would have been applauding that.
I think probably because he was about to get shafted on pre-selection, to be honest. I don't think it was like anything to do with, I've had enough, I should step back. And that's the thing, it's very self-interested and all these cancers are infiltrated in there. And just because you've got a Tanya Davies or whoever that's like a legend, right, it doesn't mean that that's going to outweigh the collective... I can't even say that.
Okay, you said
the problem is
you said, "What have you done for me lately?" What is something the Liberal or National Party has done lately that's negative?
Really failed to advocate for the greater community where they should have stepped up. Right? No, it is an answer because sometimes doing nothing is worse.
Are we talking about federal or state?
Overall.
All of the above.
The party overall.
All right. Well, we know, but who's the state leader of New South Wales for Liberals?
Mark Speakman.
Yeah, but does everybody else know that? Because I didn't know that.
Yeah, but before COVID, no one even knew who the Premier was.
Yeah, but now we're in an era where people pay attention to politics. Everybody knows who everyone is. We see Chris Minns all the time, right? And it's like we were saying about The Voice, yeah? Advanced Australia really did, I believe, set the tone for that Voice No campaign. The Liberals are chasing the tail, right, of everyone else's good policy points. Even nuclear, slow to rise. And I don't even know if that's being executed correctly at the moment.
Look,
right? There's so much wiggle room to refine it.
You've hit the crux of the problem there, Mills. I think that's what people are disenfranchised with about the Liberal Nats coalition in this day and age. Whether it's a social or economic policy, and it's something new and in the news that comes up, they seem to dilly-dally and sit on the fence for a while and see which way public opinion falls. Or I think if they were more decisive in having a public opinion on these things, if they had a finger on the pulse of the collective pulse of the working class community, the breadwinning demographic of this country's GDP, and they could honestly put hand on heart and say, well, whatever you feel about it, we feel this way about it. And if they were decisive and did it quickly, I think people would have a lot more respect for them, even if you didn't agree.
That's exactly it. That's exactly.
I'll just quickly read a comment because we've got one here from John the Boy listening on Rumble. John the Boy says, the Liberals supported the misinformation laws federally. In Victoria, Prosciutto sits on the fence and copies Labor. Give a positive of Liberals.
Well, look, I don't even.
He's absolutely right. State and federally, they support misinformation bills, disinformation bills, and the digital ID, apart from Alex Ante. Yeah, that's a weak position.
Yeah. And even then, it's like, we don't say this stuff to be mean to the Liberal Party, right? It's in our best interest to actually have them do reasonably well and then us completely demolish them in the Senate, right? That's the ideal outcome because at least we know nothing shonky's getting through, right? I don't want to disenfranchise them and demoralize the situation, but there needs to be some actual leadership, right? And I said this not too long ago. I was like, pick a struggle, any struggle. It seems like nuclear's the struggle now, right? But just getting on the front foot with literally anything would be a refreshing start. But
you think nuclear is getting on the front foot?
No, because
not really.
One Nation been talking about nuclear for ages.
Well, okay, let's bring that up then. And Warren, you might want to comment on this as well. I'll just give me a second.
Yeah, I'll give you a second, but I'm just going to say my little thing as well because I agree as well. I think Liberals are the premier, conservative party of Australian politics. We should all be following them. They should be coming up with their policies, their conservative policies, their way of leadership, and we should be all kind of like following them. So yes, you still need your minor parties and all that kind of stuff to help them and boost them, okay? And then they should throw a dog a bone and help us maybe get elected here or there to support them, much like how Labor and the Greens kind of operate, okay? So then One Nation, Libertarians, anyone else can kind of just back them up. But they're following everyone else's policies. As far as I can see, I've had this conversation with Richard. We're having the same conversation now. Okay. Pauline on the no campaign straight away.
Yeah.
Okay. She didn't get any real benefit out of it or anything like that. She was. We discussed this last time. Though she was kind of like one of the ones that came off as a loser on that because she didn't really politically gain anything. But that's what I like about One Nation still, right? Is that they have their kind of standards and the way that they want to operate, and then they straight away were no for the Voice straight away. And then it took, how long did it take Dutton to get on board? It just took him forever. It was a months, only a month or two before the referendum.
I was a bit longer than that. But you brought up nuclear, right? Yeah. And you said it was a One Nation policy. Let me play this clip. This is Malcolm Roberts speaking right after Peter Dutton came out and supported, or Peter Dutton came out with the Liberal policy on nuclear.
Malcolm Roberts, and I'm at the front of Tarong Power Station in the South Burnett region. And it's been made famous by Peter Dutton's call to convert it into a nuclear power station. Now, that's one step away from the madness of Chris Bowen and Anthony Albanese wrecking the joint with solar and wind power at exorbitant price. But there's no energy infrastructure, no industry infrastructure for nuclear. The costs are unknown, but we do know nuclear will be far cheaper than wind and solar, but that's not difficult. So no projections, relying entirely on projections, no actual costs. We don't know what will come. We just know it'll be better than Anthony Albanese and Chris Bowen's solar and wind. But what's wrong? We've got this power station right on the mouth of a coal mine. Why don't we just build a second coal mine, a second coal-fired power station here, double the capacity, use the same...
Pause it.
The stance is use coal.
Yeah. The stance is use coal.
You've been supporting nuclear. They come out with a nuclear policy and you say, no.
I tell you the distinction. We want the ban lifted. That we want to be able to look at nuclear, right? It's not to say it's practical yet. It's not to say we have the cost factor done and that we're in full support of it yet.
He's playing politics.
He's playing is don't shut the coal.
What happens is you don't need to get rid of coal.
Yes.
Based on the fact of emissions.
Well, then why would you say you're supportive of nuclear? Why don't you just say it's coal and nothing else?
If it's
because we know that we have to transition to nuclear eventually.
Why?
I don't understand why. This is a difficult concept. I don't understand why this is
anything that's going to meet the energy needs of the future.
Let's give Warren a say. Go on, Warren.
Please, Warren.
I don't firstly understand why this is a difficult concept that requires challenging. The reality is we have, so just Victoria for reference. So Loy Yang itself provides 30% of Victoria's power needs. Dependable, dispatchable baseload power. All right. Now, there's 500 years worth at the current rate of resource still in the ground at that facility or thereabouts. Now, the reality is you've already got the infrastructure there, and you have a lot of blackouts in summer, and they say because it's aging technology and it's breaking down. But the reality is there's been no security for that industry for the last 25 years because they keep getting told you're going to close. So from an investor's standpoint, why would you tip money into infrastructure to upgrade the infrastructure when you know there's no future security for your industry? All right. But if you're forced to go green, industrial green, then obviously nuclear is the best option because we can no longer sit on our moral high horse and spit vitriol about how we don't use nuclear. We're the biggest exporters of uranium on the planet, and that's absolute rubbish.
Yeah.
But coal's already here. As Malcolm alluded to, we don't know the projections of the cost of setting up nuclear. So why commit 7 facilities around the country straight up when we still do have a viable, cheap resource in the ground? Now, it's a finite resource, and arguably it's owned by companies like AGL. And if we just go nuclear and switch off all our coal power, then it is a finite resource. It's still going to be dug up, and it's still going to be exported around the planet. So again, it's a farce. But I'm all for nuclear. I think we've got the most stable geology on the planet to support it. We've got the biggest abundance of the natural resource uranium in South Australia. And I just think rather than commit and straight up say, that's it, we're going to throw 7 reactors out there and we don't know the projections, we don't know the cost. Transitional period, so that it doesn't cause a burden to the community or the economy, is to keep utilising coal, upgrade those facilities, utilise coal until that transition can be done in a functional way that doesn't send us broke.
Yeah, and if you read between the lines, right, it's very easy when you're reading between the lines. If you're looking at it from a technical perspective, you're going to stuff up and not understand what Malcolm's putting down. But you can't close one thing without the appropriate infrastructure ready to replace it.
This is what's happening with renewables.
But don't you also the science factor behind why they want to go nuclear is inadequate in from our standpoint, right? Like all this hoo-ha. Like,
so you're saying the whole push to net zero is based on the fact that supposedly carbon dioxide heats the atmosphere and we need to...
It's chasing the tail of Labor policy.
Right.
There's also a conflict of interest between the Libs and
don't you
Nats
think you
policy
guys are trying to... Sorry, Warren?
There's also a conflict of interest between the Libs and Nats policy on this. So earlier in the year, the Nats were still sort of saying, yeah, we absolutely support having rooftop power generation, not solar power generation complexes, facilities, but on rooftops. Now, that produces large amounts during the day, and we don't have the battery storage to store it throughout the day. So hence people that have put those on their roofs are now getting not as much return as what they would have. Now, that's great. I think solar on your house roof, great, fill your boots. But when you think about the money that's required to tip into starting a nuclear program from scratch, now, nuclear programs, it needs to run at high efficiency, absolute max capacity. Now, when you consider, I think I vaguely remember numbers, something about 38 or 40% they wanted to produce just from rooftop solar. Right now, that means the nuclear will only need to produce about 60% of that energy requirement to fill that niche. So you're tipping all this money into a new investment to fulfill a 60% shortfall. And I just think they need to, again, I don't like projections and I don't like modelling, but I think they need to deconflict the two respective power generation ideas before they are.
But see, Warren, you're targeting this argument on a very, fundamental. I'm talking pure politics of this, right? So One Nation have been talking about nuclear energy for a while now. Liberal Party and the National Party have come out with this new policy, and now One Nation are turning around and saying, no, we're sticking to coal. So here's my question.
We're saying not at the expense of existing industry.
Okay. So if One Nation does support nuclear energy, where would you build them?
Same as Jordan had just came on, and they've implied places like Loy Yang, where we've got existing infrastructure. There's no reason they can't coexist and build one plant right next to another until the other one becomes redundant or until one can replace the shortfall for dispatchable baseload power.
They should be basically reinvesting in coal, rebuilding the coal-fired power stations they have, using that until the coal goes and get them ready to convert to nuclear. So you can use most of the coal-fired power station turbines and all that kind of stuff. It's basically the only part of the power station that's different is the furnace, because one's a nuclear reactor and one is just a burner. Okay, so what happens is why not like do that. Like you can revamp existing coal-fired power stations, use the coal-fired power station. We know that's
making too much sense.
But no, because that's going to, that straight away, because what happens is we need also cheap energy prices so that we can build nuclear power stations. Okay. So what happens is if you've got, you rebuild it, we know that by revamping the coal, using the Australian coal, okay, we can drive the price of electricity down. Right, like 10 years ago, we were the cheapest in the world. We've been the cheapest in the world for a long time, up until recently, until they started erecting these stupid concrete towers. Okay, so what happens is, yes, I think, from what that clip was, I didn't get to see it properly, but what Malcolm was saying is that
at the end of it, he said it's bullshit.
We've always supported coal.
He said Dutton's policy for nuclear and putting a power station there is bullshit.
Because it doesn't.
Yeah, I think what he was implying.
If you open up the One Nation website and look at the energy policy, it says that you guys support nuclear.
We do support. Well, One Nation does support nuclear, right? But what happens is they also support coal
and common sense. And this is the thing. What Adam just said makes too much sense for the average politician up in the major parties right now, right? God forbid we support coal in the short term. The lefties might crack the shits with that, right? Because it's unpopular to take a practical stance of supporting what we already have in place.
Okay.
And that's the issue. There's no leadership in that and saying, well, hang on a second, let's just slow it down. Let's use coal and we'll do a gradual transition. Here's what it's going to cost. This is what it looks like. Because that sounds pretty reasonable.
Here it is, right? You said before that the Liberal Party needs to do something bold and show leadership.
Yeah, but I think they know they needed to as well, which is entirely the point. This is the first time they've been bold in the build up to a potential federal election. Let's do something bold. Let's do something big and get noticed. And it's worked.
Yeah, but
they have to.
Let's go nuclear to reduce emissions. But it's still half cost. Emissions is not the issue.
And now they're getting attacked from the left, and they're also getting attacked from the extreme right. At least Dutton has the balls to be able to do that.
No,
and showing the conviction of being able to do that. Is it a perfect policy? No, but it's a pretty good policy.
My issue is it's coming from the point of support net zero. Like it's feeding into the narrative that this is as dramatic as everybody says it is, right?
It's like, no, it should come across. Actually, Australia's going to grow, and we have one of the greatest resources in the world, which is uranium. Okay, let's build an Australia fund. Sign a bill that all nuclear
already have one.
No, but all nuclear will never ever be foreign owned.
Yeah.
All nuclear power stations will be Australian owned, okay, by the people of Australia, by the taxpayer, okay? It will be managed by the Australian government, which I don't know if you can trust that or not, but let's just say, but keep it Australian, okay? So you can't have,
that's excellent. I like that.
Xi Jinping come in, okay, and go, yeah, well, we're going to buy that mine, and then we're going to have it for a 100-year lease, and then we're going to use your nuclear power plant, and then we're going to generate that. And guess what we're going to do? Like we're doing that stupid solar plant up in Northern Territory. We're going to run the cables under the ocean and send it to Shanghai so that we can power our country and destroy your country. No, I'm going to make nuclear. I like the liberal idea of the nuclear thing, right? For the simple reason is it can set a precedent where Australians own it forever.
But they won't come at it like that because it's all about net zero, right? What Adam said makes a whole lot more sense and is a lot more popular to the average Joe who actually gives a shit about working hard in this country and making sense and being able to make a living, right? But they don't come at it from that.
You're making a presumption now that it's going to be foreign owned.
No, it's not about foreign ownership. It's about the stance that they take on it because God forbid we actually charge for the resources properly that we export from this country. God forbid we actually own.
Why can't we make $26 billion from our LNG exports instead of $324 million like Qatar?
Can I
it needs attitude adjustment surgery, right? Like it's not about the policy itself, it's how you go about it.
Go on, Warren.
The only way to predict that we have to predict future outcomes is determined by past actions or past behaviours. Now, when you consider this country and the corporatisation of this country in the last 20 years specifically, we've spent the last 20 years selling the cow and buying the milk. It's just madness, and it's likely to be more of the same. We're selling vital national infrastructure assets that are there for the benefit and profit and gain and prosperity of all future generations, and we're selling them on the cheap to cook the books so that we can provide a surplus just before every election year. Like it's absolute madness, and it'll likely happen again and again with future resources and future industries like nuclear.
I agree. And nuclear, imagine how good nuclear would be when if you're teaching kids at school, okay, because think about all the tradies that you're going to need to build nuclear power plants and maintain them. Think about all the scientists you're going to need. It gives you could divert the funds from starting nuclear power stations and keeping it Australian to boosting trade schools, to boosting nuclear universities, and actually get so we can educate our children to become tradesmen, to become physicists, to become nuclear technicians. So what happens is you could use nuclear to basically rebuild all of Australia better than it ever been. Because let's face it, right? It's going to be the biggest commodity. It's going to be worth more. So uranium back in, I think, the 30s was worth more than gold. And then it was being slowly depopularized and called dangerous and devalued and devalued and devalued and devalued to where it's worth little. When it actually at one point in time,
they didn't understand the inherent risks, and they were using it for everything. The Soviets even used uranium to power cars.
Yeah, but this is the thing. I just think I look at nuclear as a massive positive in the future for Australia, if the government does the right things. If liberals came out with their policy and said, we are going to build 7 nuclear power stations. It's going to be Australian owned and operated forever. We will put a bill into the parliament to say that it can never be, sold off.
Mark our territory.
Right? And then what happens is, with the sovereign fund, how they built the Garn rail and without any money at all, because it increased the value of the country.
No, you've completely confused that.
Did I confuse that?
It's all right.
It wasn't debt-based money that they used.
Well, that's it, not debt-based money. Well, can we not do the same thing with nuclear? Because it's going to increase the value of the country.
Well, you get a bullet in your head.
Will we? Am I going to get a bullet in my head now for saying
that's
that?
That's a completely separate.
I mean, not to dumb it down, but I feel like the broader issue here overall is that politics is just a cesspit of activists that seem to have managed to press the politicians into thinking it's relevant to go across what they want, rather than actually building the country to a prosperous country.
Let's pick up on that, because you mentioned before that the whole reason why they're pushing nuclear at the moment is because they've bowed down to this net zero
Gardner said, he still intends to comply with net zero policy by using nuclear, which I think that's a weak statement.
And essentially, it lets everyone know that the left have won this argument. Now, this week, Tucker Carlson was touring Australia, and he met some of the Australian media and some of the left-leaning Australian media. I'm going to play a couple of clips. This is the first one.
I appreciate that. You've preempted my question on Putin.
Putin!
I think you did strategically, because you knew it's what we'd ask.
He's so bad.
And I also appreciate that.
Did he make you take the COVID shot?
Take the what?
The COVID shot? No, he didn't. Sorry.
The COVID shot saved probably tens of millions.
Oh, yeah, and definitely. Safe and effective. This is why everyone loves the media.
Probably 100 times more lives than Putin has killed in
It's like a time capsule. It's like you're like the last Japanese soldier on Okinawa. You think the war's still going. No, it didn't save millions of lives.
Now, Warren, do you think that is a masterclass of how to deal with not only the left media, but also the left in general?
Look, not necessarily, because he obviously does have a microphone and he was able to, cut the other guy out and jump in and say what he wanted. But look, as far as the rhetoric goes, he's absolutely had enough. And I've watched the rest of that. He really did try to be reasonable. He really did try to entertain the concept that he absolutely finds just outrageous. And I do too, if I'm honest. And I think he handled it as best as he could. And I think his genuine laugh was absolutely genuine. He wasn't banging that on. Look, I think there's a few ways to handle it. But as far as media is concerned, look, you just got to. You have to. That's all you can do.
I reckon he absolutely spanked him, in particular that female, where he gave her ample opportunity to make her case not stupid.
Do you want to play that one?
Yeah, well, I bet you
play that one, because she wasn't looking for insight. Before you do, she's not looking for insight or to add insight or gain perspective. She's quite literally looking for an argument. That's not what the media is supposed to do.
Sorry, let me give that another go. X is horrible with playing videos, so give me a chance. But I will comment on that one quickly. She says that that he's mentioned this 4,000 times on his podcast. She doesn't cite one example. She can't give a time date. She can't give a time stamp. She can't give an episode number. Nothing. So that's just the sorry state of the media at the moment, unfortunately.
And he challenged her on that instantly. He challenged her.
Yeah. I love. That's what I was about to say, Warren. He goes, "No, I disagree with you. I don't think I've said that."
Let's. I'll bring it up.
Has anyone ever done? Sorry, has anyone ever done that to anybody?
Yeah,
Fact checked him on the spot.
It just said, "Hey, when did I say that? Or what did I do?" And then they look at you like, and I'm like, so you can't even give me one example. So therefore, I cut your statement in half and say that you're lying.
And you know what? It just showcases the laziness of Australian media because whenever it does happen, they're completely unprepared. There's no due diligence.
But hey, look, now that they're all going to be sacked from Channel 9 and Channel 7, that means there'll be a whole lot of journalists out there that will now have to become independent. So we might start getting some truth out of them.
No.
Here it is. It's going to do it again. Everyone praises Elon Musk. He needs to fix this.
Look, I can pretty much recite it anyway.
Yeah.
Tucker basically doubled back and said, well, actually, I support the Black Americans as well. Families have been here for 400 years. When did I say that I only support white people?
Mm-hmm.
She couldn't cite an example. It was an exercise of mental gymnastics for confirmation bias, basically.
That's right. And then she tried to attach shooting extremists from Buffalo and things like that and associate that with his previous comments and saying, well, then do you support not gun violence?
Responsible gun ownership.
Responsible gun ownership.
And he goes, yes, I do. And he goes, I carry.
Yeah, I don't think the
Don't
government
compare me to a maniac.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. How dare you compare me to a maniac? Shit like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, she basically...
She was trying to incite an argument the whole time.
Violence.
Yeah. She was trying to incite an argument with him the whole time. She didn't jump in to add insider game perspective at all. It was disgusting.
Australian Americans, Europeans are being replaced by non-white immigrants in what is often referred to as the Great Replacement Theory.
Mm-hmm.
This is the same.
Have I said that whites are being replaced?
Well,
I don't think I said that.
Well, it's been mentioned on your show 4,000 times. And
really, when did I say that?
On your show,
I said whites are being replaced.
You have said that before.
Really?
Yeah.
I would challenge you to cite that because I'm pretty sure I haven't said that. I said native-born Americans are being replaced, including blacks.
Native-born Americans.
Native-born Americans. And Americans who, like Black Americans, African Americans have been in the United States for, in many cases, their families over 400 years, and their concerns are a bit as real and valid and alive to me as the concerns of white people whose families have been there 400 years. So I've never said that whites are being replaced. Not one time, and you can't cite it.
Untrue.
So we just met, but when our relationship starts with a lie, it makes it tough to be friends. So
you've been lying
let's
about
pull
my
that back.
press
I'm happy to
gallery
explain what I do think.
So,
well, you actually can't say it because I didn't say it, and I don't believe it, and I'm telling you that to your face. So why don't you just accept me at face value?
What do you think, Warren?
Yeah, so exactly that. As I said, so she was just trying to incite an argument by saying something controversial, but she'd made a series of assumptions before she even approached him with it. She didn't expect him to challenge her on it, and which is immediately what he did and what he absolutely had to do. I think he handled that quite well. He tried to be reasonable. He wasn't trying to invalidate her. He was trying to gain clarification as the interaction for the interaction to progress. He wanted to make sure they were on a firm footing first.
If you were to be elected to the Senate, I know this is a tricky topic because you don't want to have too much government control over the media, but what can be done to address this? I mean, this is a sorry state of the media, not just here in Australia, but almost everywhere in the Western world. We're seeing a lot happening at the moment in the UK with Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage came out and said that Channel 4 hired an actor to pose as a Reform UK candidate and then go spruik racist comments everywhere. So the media is not acting objective at all. Is there some sort of way that governments can, like good governments, can bring journalism back to what it should be?
Short answer is no. Government regulation isn't the answer. And I think I prescribe to a different theory than most people. A lot of people look at all the things going on in this country and the world now and think they're starting to become insurmountable obstacles. I see them as a series of challenges that a few minor policy changes, flow-on implications, will largely sort out the rest of the things themselves. All right. So firstly, it's like the free market economy. People choose the media that they choose to engage with or that they want to be given. And largely people do that off their own biases, and they are looking for confirmation of their own biases through the media that they watch or whatnot. Now, firstly, I don't think anybody agrees that the ABC represents the majority of Australian value sets anymore. And I believe if the ABC can't compete in the free market economy, why are we as government funding the ABC to continue broadcasting? You know what I mean? So I feel like that's the first step. Either reduce or remove funding for ABC, and then they'll have to be more impartial and actually make it, the type of news that covers such a broad spectrum that people will want to watch it again. I mean, that interview itself, I think Tucker says at one point, I watched the ABC this morning. It was disgusting. And it is. I watched it for about an hour myself. I'm like, are you kidding? Is this for real? But I think, and now we watch, so a lot of people looking to free media or looking outside the mainstream media to gain their news. And as a result, less people are watching 7 News, 9 News. And as I alluded to earlier, now we have reporters being sacked from those companies. Just dropped like hot tomatoes. Well, it's not because they weren't towing the narrative, because they've definitely been doing that. I think it's one of those situations. The flow and implications are slowly sorting themselves out.
Yeah, and they're losing out in the attention economy, right? Social media has really replaced them with their relevance as it is. And they think, again, honing in on all this lefty stuff is going to get their popularity back, and it's just not.
Unfortunately, social media doesn't sway the narrative, though. They're still
the shift
they're
is
still getting in
cultural.
front of these politicians and being able to ask them certain questions that does dictate the narrative. So that is a problem.
Oh, it's definitely a problem. I just don't think there's a government solution. I think it's cultural, the shift. But the average person is sick of it. Yeah, the average person is sick of it. Like, I fully agree with Warren. And it will sort itself out. There's a bit of a collective shift going on where people are really quite sick of being spoken to, like they're juveniles that are incapable of thinking for themselves. Yeah.
Warren, have you had any dealings with the media that that was questionable for you?
I have a little bit questionable in a different way. So largely they try and not give us a platform at all, obviously, which is why we get an opportunity on, say, Sky and things like that. But a lot of the media, especially in Melbourne, a lot of people actually, a little off topic, say, why don't I hear about anything about what Ricky's doing? Why don't I hear anything about Ricky Lee-Tyrrell in Northern Victoria? She mustn't be doing anything. No, it's just not getting publicised because, she's not jumping up and down and trying to get in front of cameras, because we tried that early on and they wouldn't have it. So it got a little bit harder to get media attention as a One Nation member in Victoria. And for me, myself, I've done some interviews where it was just a bit disingenuous, all right? So I'll always request, go, all right, depending on what the organisation or the interviewer is, I'm like, all right, how are they going to try and portray me? Are they going to try and drag me over the coals and throw me a few sticky ones? I'm reasonably articulate and I'm happy to pivot on the run. But when you specifically ask and go, all right, what topics would you like to cover? I'd like to just make sure I'm well versed. Okay, this, and this. And then I've gone into the interview and they've just jumped that completely and run with something else. You're like, okay. So you've used your pre-scripted questions, bullshitted me in an effort to get me in front of you so that you can then look like a consummate professional with your own subject matter expertise, made me look like an idiot through ignorance because I had no idea what we were going to be talking about. It's disingenuous. And I haven't got time for it. But it happens.
And so,
it happens.
Basically, Ricky hasn't done anything embarrassing. That's why she's not in the media. She's actually doing her job. This is nothing controversial.
We definitely need to have Ricky back on the show, but just from your perception, is she enjoying it in there? Is it everything that she thought it would be?
Yeah, look, she is largely. She's taken to it like a duck to water, but she's not a naturally abrasive person, and I think that's taken a lot of Victorian Parliament by surprise. They were expecting a Pauline, and they've got Ricky Lee. Like, she's very diplomatic, she's very reasonable, and she's very understanding. And I don't think initially they knew how to handle her. They were waiting for her to explode, but now they've realised she's completely reasonable. But look, she enjoys it and she's good at it.
And how much authority do you guys have to lead like the policies and stuff that you're trying to put forward? Do you have to answer to Pauline and the One Nation in Queensland?
At the state level, so Ricky and I formulated all the policy for Vic State. We piggybacked off some of Malcolm's work in Murray-Darling Basin Plan and things like that. And I expanded that now, and then I submitted that to the federal executive, which Pauline is the president of, Senator Hanson's the president of, to be approved before we'd start promoting it. So, yeah, look, we have full autonomy to manage ourselves as we see fit. And Senator Hanson said that herself. She goes, look, she said that in an ABC interview on Ricky's swearing in. ABC got a hold of her, and they asked whether she was going to be interfering in Victoria, and she said, I'm not a subject matter expert on Victoria. I'm going to allow them the autonomy to manage and govern themselves the way they see fit. Ricky Lee is elected to represent the constituents of Northern Victoria region. The boss doesn't know anything about those people, and I think, look, that's still the case now. It's been great. I'm reformulating policy now so that I can get it up on the state page, and just. Yeah, it needs to be an constantly evolving process. That's the purpose of policy. Yeah, so we've largely got full autonomy there. Just needs ultimate approval from the federal exec.
Well, that's good to hear anyway. That they kept to their word and didn't try to dictate One Nation down in Victoria. So that's good. That's positive, and I hope you guys continue the good work.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. We will.
Now, Warren, you recently held a rally, the digital ID rally. You talked about it a little bit before. So this digital ID legislation has passed through the Parliament, so it's in law now. I know some senators, Senator Antic and also Canavan, Ralph Babette, Malcolm Roberts, Pauline, and a few others are supporting a bill to repeal that legislation. One Nation does have a policy called citizen-initiated referenda, and I actually wrote an article in The Spectator last week proposing that sort of legislation to be introduced. So the voting public does have the opportunity to repeal unpopular legislation. Would the digital ID be a perfect example for citizen-initiated referenda?
Yeah, I believe so. I think the CIR is a great idea. Because it removes all the bureaucratic red tape that the public largely feel like they have no power to change things. People like you or I know, because we've engaged in the political sphere, and we realise, you email your local member, 90% of the time you'll get some sort of response back. It's like, all right, if enough people do that, collectively we can slowly make a difference. And I think that's where a citizens-initiated referenda is great, because you bypass a lot of that process. And I think that's the perfect one for a plethora of reasons. The first being the people that this affects most, which is every single Australian when it is inevitably made mandatory someday, don't know that this affects them yet. They don't know how this is going to affect them until it's far too late, and it's already too late. And if we had a CIR, it'd be a great way to engage. Look, and the second reason that it's perfect is because it was chucked in as stack as an omnibus bill. The Albanese Labor government knew it was going to be a contentious issue, yet they guillotined debate on it by throwing it through as an omnibus bill and having it signed off. And then when it went back down through the House of Reps, they still didn't even debate it in the chamber. That's unbelievable. A contentious bill like that just being pushed through, it's outrageous. That's what the House of Review is for.
And that's where the media kind of comes into, hey, where they just will not touch certain things at the behest of those in government. Yeah.
And Tucker said that as well. The media should be reporting on the government. That's their job, is to report on the government.
Yeah.
And put what's going on out there.
It's essentially meant to be the fourth branch of government, unofficial fourth branch. It's meant to hold the government to account objectively, and it's just not at the moment. It's almost like a propaganda arm of the government.
Yeah.
Now, especially the ABC.
And that's what I was alluding to before, with people going to independent media streams and things like that. So we can post stories and videos and hold rallies and post our own content related to it. People get a hold of that. That seems to be how people are finding out about the consequences of these types of bill. That's not how they should be finding them out. And then they wonder why nobody's watching Channel 7 or Channel 9 News anymore, or ABC News anymore. That's why.
That's why we should
not reporting the bloody news.
That's why there's meant to be an opposition in Parliament as well, isn't there?
Mm-hmm.
Because at the moment we've just got a bipartisan.
Tell it.
A bipartisan, or sorry, not a bipartisan
You're talking about Dutton opposed The Voice, the Albanese's big
He
plan.
hasn't opposed the digital identity,
opposed
though.
to digital
Or
ID?
misinformation, disinformation bills. He supported both.
Because it all
Well, I do agree with you, Warren. That was I didn't like that. I don't like how he came out and supported the misinformation, disinformation. But look, I mean,
it all flows on. It's because the reason why is because that's all part of that particular narrative. So you need the digital ID, you need the central banking system, you need
and why aren't we having a discussion about this? I mean, I talked about it on the podcast last night. I also, as I said, I wrote this article. Why aren't we really putting pressure collectively? And it's a multi-party thing. It doesn't matter if you're One Nation, Liberal, Libertarian, UAP, whatever party you're in, we can all support that there needs to be more safeguards against this authoritarian push by governments currently, ever since the COVID period, to enforce these policies that erode our freedoms. Why aren't we pushing back and saying, hey, we do want a citizen-initiated referenda. We do want plebiscites for treaties. We do maybe potentially want recall elections.
Well, we are, but this goes back to what you said at the start.
Minor parties.
What was that, Warren?
I said this sort of goes back to what you said at the start. This is where minor parties are important, so that we can not only bring the Conservative Party back to its conservative centre, but so that we can execute the will of the people to those parties. Let them know we are watching, we are keeping them honest, and this is what the
but
people
Warren,
want.
here's the danger. The Labor Party formed government on 32% of the primary vote, and the Liberals had 34% of the primary vote and lost 20 seats.
If we had the balance of power, all of that would be completely irrelevant, which is really the core point of why we need the minor parties.
And that's another big problem. I mean, the Greens, if you count Lydia Thorpe, have 12 senators, whereas on the other side could equally have just as many if they got their preference discipline on, or if they're maybe one minor party is okay, but when there's bloody countless list of them and the votes are spraying over everywhere, you look at the Greens on one side with 12. And you can throw Pocock in there and Jack Lambie and all these other ones.
I could
you
see
look
it's a
over
bit
the
of a
other side
conflict.
of the chamber, and there's Pauline, Malcolm, and Ralph Babette sitting there.
But
I think I could see it's a bit of a conflict of interest for you, mate. But the reality is, if the Liberal Nats coalition was the opposition that Australia truly deserved, they wouldn't be in this bloody mess. There wouldn't be so many.
You wouldn't need the minor parties.
Well, the problem is you always
Well,
have
we
minor
wouldn't.
parties.
We wouldn't. But they're in this mess because they aren't the conservative opposition that Australia deserves.
Well, I think you need the minor parties because I think it's, I know libertarians they want less government. But the problem is if you reduce the government to a point where there's only one arm of the government, then it's authoritarian. So what happens is by having minor parties in there and ruffling feathers and getting points out and things across the table, it's actually not authoritarian. Because to some small degree, okay, Labor and the Greens are being held accountable. And then if some people in the street might go, geez, that rubs me a little bit the wrong way. And then what happens is all of a sudden you have somebody like Senator Malcolm Roberts, someone like Senator Ralph Babette, someone like Senator Hanson come out and say, hey, this is what's going on and this is why you're feeling that way, right? That kind of takes away the authoritarianism of, right? Like, because what you're in essence proposing is that all the minor parties should just pack up, fold up, and get support behind Liberal. And we already know that's an old saying, but Liberal and Labor are still the.
I don't know who needs to hear this. I know it's you that needs to hear this, but I'm just going to go ahead and say it. They don't intend on keeping people that actually get things done in those parties. Look at what just happened to Gerard Rennick. Okay. They stacked its mum to try and get him out.
Okay, you can make your other points. Here's what happened to Alex. Here's what happened to Jared Rennick. Same thing with Russell Broadbent. Same thing with Craig Kelly. All their supporters, the people that should have been supporting them, left the Liberal Party and joined minor parties. So that's a big problem. So you got all these people mingling around the minor parties when they should be in the Liberal Party protecting those people.
No, because they captains picked a whole bunch of them. And obviously Cam and Zulu took them to court over that. And then we found out why that can't be reprimanded, right? But they captains picked, they went against their own membership to choose the flops that they wanted in there, right?
And sure, that's a battle that the Liberal Party has to
to
fight internally, but it could be a much easier battle if all the people in the minor parties were fighting that battle in the Liberal Party.
If you can't honour the will of your own membership that pay you to represent them and vote, for their desired representative. If that's the bare minimum. It's giving bare minimum, right? They can't even honor that. Okay, so what's to say that
what's the alternative? Because it's still the only party on the right that can form government.
Okay, but chill, go do that.
At the moment, yeah.
Like
fine.
I said, I think it's irrelevant.
exactly.
I don't care, because I think that we need to really actually absolutely cockblock the shit legislation in the Senate. Excuse my language, but you know what I mean? There's no other viable alternative to me, because even if you got in there hypothetically, if they actually picked you, which I'm not even dead set, and not because you're not any good, right? But because they don't have the balls to pick someone like you because you're controversial, right?
Am I?
I believe you are. Look at this bloody podcast. It's truth for days, right? And so I'm not even sure they would honor you as a human being and actually do right by you. But even if they did, it's there's still going to be all these different issues within the party.
Here's the problem. All my supporters are in minor parties. Everyone that watches this podcast, people on the ground.
I think that's where leadership, but that's where leadership comes into it, mate. Because what happens is, if you did get pre-selected and were up for a vote, those people would come across.
And then on top of that, he's former One Nation. We better not pre-select him. Stuff the membership. Let's captains pick our candidate for that area, because he's going to get rung through the media.
I thought you weren't going to mention that, little Miss Former.
I'm not former anything. We can go there. Check the record.
But I think the crux of the problem with the distribution of votes and things like that, and I think the crux of the problem that you're alluding to with people in minor parties, it more relates to people not feeling represented by their elected representatives. More and more people are disenfranchised because they don't feel like they're getting the representation they deserve. That's the crux of it. Now, we are a very diverse community in Australia, and everybody deserves representation. Look, that's why, socialists vote for the Greens. I'm not saying we should get rid of the Greens. People, they represent people, The point is, if you're elected to represent your entire community, not just those that voted for you. You're elected to represent those that would never vote for you or your party ever. And you need to do that the best way possible. But you also need to do it with conviction to honour your own values and the values that you were elected on. And I think that's what's missing from the Liberal Party. And that's why people are going to minor parties.
I think when you're elected to represent the people of Australia, you are elected to represent all of them. But in the best interest of Australians first and Australia. And I think that's what's being lost, because when they sell off all the resources, when they just keep driving up inflation, keep spending money that doesn't really need to be spent on they're spending money on the wrong things, really. They're not building wealth in the country. I think a lot of them should be held accountable, and a lot of them should lose their seats. And I don't care from what side, Labor and Liberal, they should all it should be a clean house election, this federal election coming, because I think we need to get a little bit more nationalistic, not so globalist.
Yeah, and back to what you were saying, Steve, credit where it's due, right? Barnaby Joyce had some good things to say in regards to the digital ID debate, right? About the primacy of the people and all these things. So some good eggs in there that actually do their job, right?
Well, I mentioned before, Antic and Canavan, they're heading this repeal of the digital ID bill.
But also, they shouldn't be fighting for dear life to actually survive in that party,
right?
But
this goes back to they need people in there to back them up.
Yeah, but again,
they're also the party that floated the bill under the Morrison government 5 years ago.
And that's it.
Well, sure. There's bad eggs in there. I've got a comment. Oh, actually, a question here from Mr. Robert Nalbandian. For Warren, if elected, how would you represent zealous climate fanatics or people with ideas opposed to your own?
Specifically on that topic, I'd represent them as I just alluded to that I would. I represent everybody, even those that would never elect me personally or my party or my value set. So if you're a climate zealot, I'd argue that, well, I don't want to argue with these people. If I was forced to argue, I'd say, well, I don't subscribe to the fact that climate change is man-made. Firstly, while I do believe climate change is a thing, I believe it's a natural process that we've been going through. We've taken ice core measurements that date right back to 12,500 years ago, the Younger Dryas period, which was the last glacial melt. All right. Now, there's been a series of up and down since then. And to be honest, we're still only now coming out of the tail end of the last glacial maximum. All right. Now, that implies that there is going to be climate variance around the planet and that it's a natural process. All right. Now, it's your prerogative to believe that narrative and go down that way, and it's mine to believe this. Now, all I'm doing is representing Australia and its best economic and social interest. All right. So when you talk about anything climate related, I'm firstly going to go, all right, so you seem to think we need to curtail, power generation, for instance. And I'll be like, okay, now to encapsulate that the best that I can, I'm advocating that we need to take smart economic policy with our energy policy rather than, going nuts for this climate change stuff to the detriment of the community and our economic produce out of this country, because we still need to sustain ourselves. The flow and implications of, climate policy is just, it's dangerous. It's literally going to send us broke. The skyrocketing costs to produce materials and everything else. The flow and implications of this, we haven't even begun to see them yet.
And not just that,
look,
like
I'll be trying to represent those that don't agree with me from an economic standpoint and make sure they can prosper economically. And whether they disagree with me socially or scientifically, look, at least they'll have money in their back pocket at the end of the month when the bill comes in.
And not just that, Warren's the type of person where he's going to be able to evaluate the environmental damage as well. Because it's not like we're anti-environment, we're actually reasonable people.
I am an environmentalist.
Exactly right. So, and someone like Warren is more likely to evaluate the broader damage rather than just jumping on the bandwagon with
cutting down trees. Cutting down trees to save the planet makes no sense to me at all.
Yeah,
that's as simple as it gets. It's just the stupidest.
Let's get rid of the thing that eats the carbon. Bro.
Yeah. But I think,
on that topic, I think rather than the climate change, I think the bigger elephant in the room that poses the biggest threat to biodiversity on this planet is plastics, and forever chemicals, PFAS and things like that. But microplastics have been found in Antarctica and everywhere.
Yeah.
Well, and the thing is, you have a look at that. I mean, the wind propellers on the turbines are made of all the stuff that's quite bad for the environment anyway, and it all breaks off and it all goes into the environment as it is. So I mean, you could try to argue. This is where, unfortunately, the real left and green ideology comes into it, and that's where they become unreasonable. But on this topic, funnily enough, I've still got signage on the side of my van, and I was driving down the street the other day, and somebody's come up to me, this old nice lady, Sharon her name was, and she's like trying to get me off the road, right? So she makes me pull over, and I pull over, and I'm like, what's going on here? What did I do? Right? Anyway, she wanted to talk to me because she thought I was an elected member of parliament, and she's like, they're cutting down all the trees on Appin Road finally, right? But they're cutting down all the trees on Appin Road, and all the koalas are dying, and this, that, the other. And I said, okay. So, and then she goes, what are you going to do about it? Because Labor aren't doing anything about it. And I said, well, funnily enough, I said, and I always say, like, I was One Nation, and I campaigned to have Appin Road, rebuilt and into 2 lanes each way. And she goes, but the koalas and all the trees are getting cut down. I said, well, they're only cutting down the trees at the side of the road, which are only 3 or 4 deep. It's not like it's fixed scrubland, okay? And I said, what would you rather? Would you rather see people die or animals die? And she looked at me and I said, because at the way it is now, we've had 30 people die on this road. And she's coming from an activist kind of green point of view, okay? Animals and trees and stuff like that, okay? And I said to her, so I just explained to her, that said, I think animals will have more of a chance of survival with a decent road where people can use evasive maneuvers. And she looked at me like, that makes heaps of sense. So it's not like they can't be educated and reasoned with most of them. I think regarding what Warren's talking about, and the question that you asked him was, I think you have to pick your battles, and you have to see if somebody's actually a reasonable person that you can talk to, or somebody's just bent. And if they're bent, then just walk away.
I think it's all about listening to people. Obviously, you're not going to be able to give everyone everything that they want. And if you are an elected representative, you can't. It's impossible to make everyone happy. But at least listen to people. Don't just shut them out. And a lot of politicians just ignore people, or they don't reply to emails, or they make people feel isolated and abandoned, and that's wrong. So
I agree with that completely.
Now, Warren, we're getting towards the end here. I know we're all having a lot of fun, and we could probably keep going, but I know it's a long way out from the federal election, or maybe it's not. Maybe he'll call an early election. Maybe we'll be in the polls around November, December. But without maybe just focusing on policy, because I know you might not want to release your policies this far out, but overall ideology and what you want to achieve in Parliament, maybe what are 3, big issues for you that you really want to tackle with this upcoming election?
Look, one of the big ones I've got a personal problem with that is it's very prevalent here in my region at the moment, because we're being shut out of the Victorian Central Highlands forestry area for all recreational activities. Now, however that's occurred, there was an eminent panel put together. Firstly, all the members were hand selected, and then they cherry picked the stakeholders that they choose to engage with, so that they could have their predetermined biases confirmed by said panel. And now, as a result, they didn't engage any four-wheel drive clubs, they didn't engage any motorbike clubs, they didn't engage any hunting parties. They just engaged the bushwalkers, the inner city bushwalkers. So as a result, it's now being locked out, and we will no longer have access to it. And I've got a few arguments about this, and there is a few things I'm working on with Senator Roberts' office with regard to this situation before I give too much away. But the reality is, a lot of the small communities, they will not be able to sustain themselves if a bushwalker comes out from an inner city suburb once every 5 years, buys a bag of trail nuts and a soy latte. They're not going to sustain themselves. They need these parties to come out here and spend their money. So as a result, I've looked further into all the other community consultation processes around the state. Now, so that's V&I West wind farms, that's transmission lines, that's industrial solar power generation facilities, and they're all an absolute farce. They are a tick in the box affair, and they all associate to land acquisition one way or another, whether it's for under environmental protections for Indigenous corporations, or whether it's for new industrial green power generation. Ultimately, I feel like that is where the problems of the future lie: land acquisition. People have a right to their own property, and I think that's being taken away from us. So I'd like to actively put some effort on that with regard to my campaign. I don't necessarily want to go too far down the conspiratorial pathway with, this all seems to comply with UN Agenda 2030, but it really does. It really does. So that's a big one for me. And obviously, green energy, as you said, without going too much into my personal policy. But green energy, and I think digital, economic, and social sovereignty. I think that's what's at risk. Yeah,
that's the biggest one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, we are playing in part.
If we do nothing, we will all be in a digital incarceration within the next 5 years. Absolutely.
And people can't see it.
Well, I believe so. The preservation of a free society requires eternal vigilance and action. And if you're an elected member, state or federal, in that context, and you're not placing yourself between the bullet and its proposed target, then you're not doing your job, because by its very nature, that is your job when the Australian people are the target, right? And furthermore to that, you don't get to claim benign ignorance through complacency as an elected member of Parliament. We, the people, the Australian people, will hold you directly accountable for your part played, or no, that's not even the right word. We hold you directly accountable for the erosion of individual and economic sovereignty of the Australian people. This is why One Nation has picked up a state seat in every state and 2 federal seats as senators. We're gaining traction. People are waking up. And we're coming for their jobs. And to the Australian people, before we do go, I just want the Australian people to know that One Nation never has and never will capitulate to tyranny. We never have and never will capitulate to the crippling tenets of globalism. And if you want to change the trajectory of this country for the benefit of all future generations like I do, you need to give us your number 1 or your number 2 preference at the top. Change your voting habits.
Yep.
Put a whole new generation of One Nation MPs into the Senate. Give us a chance.
Shit, I hope you get voted in, mate. I do.
Warren, thank you very much for coming on tonight. I'm sure most of the audience was very impressed with you as always. Good luck with your campaign, and hopefully we'll speak to you again before the election and maybe you can outline some more solid policies. But the final segment of the ex-candidates, and we didn't have this in place last time you were on, or the way back when, is called Build Your Own Fantasy Government. Now, Warren, you're in control of the next Parliament of Australia, and you can choose 5 or 6 people. They can be anyone you possibly want them to be. They can be living or dead, whoever you want. 5 or 6 people to head up the next Parliament of Australia. Who would you choose?
I think there's a lack of creativity in politics, thinking outside the box. So having said that, I'd go with someone like Leonardo da Vinci. Yeah. Look, there's some people I think I'd love to have on board, but I think they'd be too pessimistic for me to work with, whereas I've got a sunny disposition. So I'd love to have someone like Aldous Huxley or George Orwell, but I don't think I'd probably work that well with them. Yeah, that's a tough one. Maybe Ayn Rand. But then you don't want too many writers because there's too many philosophers and nothing will get done. Tough one. Maybe we'll throw Einstein in there and Mahatma Gandhi. Someone from a spiritual standpoint. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, that's all right. They're randoms, man. We haven't had anyone say those kind of people before. No one's ever said. We've been doing it for a long time. No one's ever said Leonardo da Vinci.
You could just summon everyone who was executed for their values. Really, it'd be a solid cracker.
That's probably a good answer.
Yeah.
That's probably a very good answer.
Yeah.
It's probably the best answer we've had. Although maybe there's some bad people that were executed for good reason, bad ideas.
So, like what like John JFK, Abraham Lincoln,
Galileo,
even Martin Luther King. Really, just summon them all. The Avengers of memories past.
Very good. Very good. This is why we have you on the show, Millie.
Yeah. Bringing the vibes.
Now, Warren, if people do want to follow you and keep up to date with everything that you're doing, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, so just my name and One Nation Victoria, either at Facebook or on Instagram. I haven't got an X account up yet because I usually write posts that are far too long. So I'm going to have to consolidate that and develop a new skill set.
Yeah. Well, you're a big thinker, mate. So you got to have a platform to get all those thoughts down.
Yeah, look, and I do like writing is my creative outlet. It's sort of just always been my thing. So,
by the way, I didn't ask you, how's your book going? The book that you were writing about.
It's still going. I've been too busy. I've done. Look, it's evolved, and I've now incorporated some. Yeah, well, decidedly more entertaining topics because I felt like I was being a bit too factual. So I've tried to add a bit more personality to it. But yeah, look, it's still a work in progress.
I want to buy the first copy if you ever finish it and get it published.
I will finish it one day. And I think I'll self-publish so I don't have to fail to, suffer my own self-criticism for not finding somebody that wants to publish.
All right, Millie, thank you also for joining us. How do people follow you?
Oh, just milverse.gov across all platforms. I'm around. You'll find me on Instagram for the most part, though, because I'm really illiterate with the other.
Oh, wait, hold on a second. Hold on.
What?
Oh, we can't finish yet, unfortunately. I'm sorry, Warren.
She's
Mr. Robert Nalbandian has called in.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, mate.
G'day.
How you going? I'm Robert Nalbandian. How you doing? How you going, Steve?
Good, mate. Long time no talk.
Yeah, about what? 19 hours?
Yeah, probably about that, yeah. Mate, we're just about to finish up. Warren's been very gracious with his time. So
Yes.
shoot through a comment or a question.
No, I think I posted the question about representing zealous climate fanatics.
Oh.
One thing this is just my thinking. Say you get elected with 51% of the vote, right? It's 51-49. You beat them, great. And, I'd love to see all the minor parties elected. But something I realised, so I'm in the electorate seat that's being removed in federal, which is North Sydney, and we got a teal, right? Now, the teals don't care about any of my views. They don't care about religion. They don't really care about the environment. They don't care about the housing cost, food costs. They don't care about any of that. So they're not really representing me. And I thought to myself, if I was elected, would I really care what some climate change zealot came up to me and said, you're not doing enough? I'd be like, look, you probably didn't vote for me, so I can only represent you as a constituent in the electorate. So that's just my thinking on that.
Yeah, well,
I've changed
that's
my
what
mind.
I thought you meant, which is why I tried to answer it that way. Sorry to jump in, mate. But yeah, obviously you want to make sure that everybody feels heard, because ultimately that's what we want as Australian citizens. We want to know that our elected representatives are listening to us for a start, but not just listening and paying it off, listening and create honest dialogue around it. If you don't share the same value set as your Teal's representative clearly doesn't, they should at least do you the courtesy of listening to you and going, well, do you know what, mate? I want to explain things from my perspective, and if we can't find a compromise somewhere in the middle, then we'll just get on them, and just be sure that I'm looking out for your economic interest, or just be sure that I'm looking out for your, healthcare interests, because these are my areas of expertise.
Yeah, definitely. And also, sorry.
So I think it's a bit of a moot point, because if you're in an area like you're saying, like a Teal'd area or something like that, I mean, like, you're never going to get voted in anyway. If with stances like ours,
you never know.
Point. No, that implies that there's nobody with conservative values living in a Teal area, or vice versa.
No, because what happens is, but if you're living, if it's a Teal area, okay, and like look at my area, it's a Labor area, okay, 56% of the vote. Even Liberal only got 36 or something %. You know what I mean? So like, what happens is, like, I mean, they're only electing people who are on their wavelength anyway. So what happens is, if by some amazing chance you got elected by 51-49%, like what you were saying, well, like, I just don't see it happening. I just think it's a moot point. I just think it's not. I just think it wouldn't happen.
It also comes down to the fact that we're not talking about the lower house right now. Like, we're talking about the Senate, right? In which you would have to give some consideration, I would say, not kowtowing to the population, but consideration of what they're saying, as opposed to just being a community local representative.
Okay.
Very different kettle of fish, right?
Yeah.
So I think what Warren's really trying to say is that, yeah, I'll give it consideration. I'll try to do what's right by everyone within reason. But of course, his values are going to make a whole lot of common sense. It's going to come into direct conflict with some of the stuff going on that people have been indoctrinated to believe.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, no, I was looking at more of a lower level, not the Senate level. You're right. But I mean, I could understand that. Why? Well, you could approach it that way too. Like, you have your people who really want, like, the green renewable stuff, and I mean, like, you could say, like, hey, on my standpoint is, I understand that, and if it was a viable option to use, but I take into account, like you're saying, like, the economic crisis, the economic and the land devastation. Just those two things alone really make it not. You should actually be against it on the stance that you're saying. So you kind of
you're saying at least explain to your constituents
why you're taking the stance.
Specific stance on things. Like, I understand what you're saying, but my perspective is, I'm trying to achieve this, this, or this, and I feel like this is, counterintuitive.
Warren,
so that's why I voted on specific.
Warren, did you run in the 2022 election?
State, yeah, federal? I did. I ran for it.
No, the federal. Okay, so
what? Yeah, sorry, I did. Yeah, on the Senate ticket. Sorry, I'm thinking. Yeah, it was the same year that we had our state in Victoria. So it does my head when people say 2022. I'm like, oh, that's right. I ran in May and then again in November. Yeah.
Right. So my experience, and yours might be the same, I don't know, but like during the pre-poll, I got the pleasure of dealing with the Teal volunteers. There was no common ground. Like, they just got offended when I said, you guys are living in a bubble about climate change. Maybe I was a bit harsh the way I said it, but I couldn't get common ground to say the science is not in. They're like, oh, you don't believe in the science and the the International Climate Change Panel, and you just want coal for, because I ran in the UAP, so they're like, you just want coal for Clive. I'm like, no. So it was very difficult to converse any logical facts, because people are locked often in their emotions to an ideology, and you're going to destroy that through facts, and you'll upset people.
especially with people like the Teals and their volunteers. It is quite literally a cult. Have a look at the definition in the dictionary. It is.
Yes, yep, cult. You know, I call him Shaq. Simon Holmes at court. He's the Shaq cult leader.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
it gets hard to talk to them. So, and another thing you mentioned about,
I'm sure you're the same. I try not to be too abrasive when I know there's going to be a conflict of position on something, but I still want to create dialogue around it. And I think that's missing from politics now. We're too busy shutting down dialogue because someone will say something decidedly controversial, and then it'll cause a reaction from an emotional response, and it'll squash all dialogue on the topic they're on. Now, that's fine. You can have an emotional reaction if you want, but the reality is you need to remove yourself from this conversation because we've got some serious issues in this country, domestically and internationally, that we need to discuss.
Yep.
And I think we need to discuss things from a place of compassion. But you can do that without being emotionally triggered. And I think it's absolutely paramount that we do. Otherwise, we're not going to have these hard conversations.
Yeah, that's right.
Look, I better cut in because we were about to finish up. But thanks for calling in, Robert. Always appreciate your contribution.
Hope you run again, mate.
We have to. Fight's not over.
Yeah. Good man.
See ya.
Good man.
Okay, and thank you everyone for watching. All if you I guess want to support Warren and spread his name out there, please share this episode around. You know, we all know Warren's a great guy, and I'm sure he'll do good things in the Parliament once he's elected one day. He came close last time, mate. I'm sure you'll get there this time.
Yeah, look, let's hope so, mate. It's for the greater good of all future generations. It's not about me or the party. It's for the constituents and all future generations of Australians. So thanks for your time, guys. Appreciate it.
No worries. All right. Thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you all next time.
See ya.